All right, well, I've shown you how to quickly and easily insert a wrapper using the insert functions here. And as you can see, insert div tag is what we did. And we're going to do a little bit more about that as well. But as you can see, inside of my CSS definition, there's a couple of things I want to do first. Before we insert any of the other wrappers, any of the other divs, excuse me, inside of our wrapper div, there's a couple of things I want to make sure that we have ready for us. Now, first of all, what I want to do is to create a new CSS rule. And as you can see here, all you really got to do is click on this little plus sign. Now, usually at this point is where you choose the selector for CSS. Now, that selector can be created as a custom class, it can be an ID, it can be a tag, or a compound based on your selection. Well, what I want to do is to say, let's redefine a HTML tag. Now, we're going to be redefining the body tag in just a second, but first and foremost, what I want you to do is to add this little symbol, the asterisk sign. What that means is we are now creating something called a universal selector. The asterisk sign is a universal selector, meaning any definition that I apply to this asterisk will be applied to absolutely every single thing on this page. You might be wondering, why do we do that? And I'll explain in just a second. Do notice this. Since we've already defined an external style sheet called style.css, we will not be placing anything inside this document only. Never do that. We don't need to create a new style sheet. We already have one created called style.css. So all of our definitions, including this universal selector, will be defined inside of style.css. So let's click OK. All right, now what do we want the universal selector to do? Remember, it means do the same thing for every single tag on this page. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to set the padding to 0 and set the margin to 0 in the box category that we have right here. Notice on the body you see that there's some spacing at the top here. That's because there's some default margin and padding to every element that's on this page. Well, at this point, if we were to say OK, what happens is you'll notice that your wrapper is snapped all the way up the top. There's no margin, there's no padding on anything in this page right now. Now, why is that a good thing? Well, one of the problems that we'll oftentimes encounter as developers is the fact that different browsers and have different ways of dealing with margins. So in other words, Internet Explorer has a proprietary method of working with margins that's different from Firefox, excuse me, or any other different browser that we have available. So by implementing a universal selector that pairs everything down to 0, there's 0 margin and 0 padding as we start on this particular project. And what that means is everything is equal. 0 is 0. 0 is the same in Firefox, excuse me, just as it is inside of Internet Explorer. So that's a fantastic thing for us to do right at the beginning. And generally speaking, even before I create my wrapper div, I usually like to create this universal selector pairing everything down to 0. So I'm going to take it and I'm also going to move it at the top of my CSS list. Now you might be wondering, why do we do that? Well, it's just to organize things a little bit better. But I also want to bring to your attention something else. All of these definitions for CSS we've been sort of defining through Dreamweaver's site definition window here, CSS styles. And look, you can edit this again by selecting any of your definitions and coming over here where it says edit rule, and you can come back and change any of these settings. Now I don't want to do that necessarily. I'm happy with these settings. We will have to make a change to wrapper eventually. But check it out. Here where it says source code, we can see the source code for this page. That's fine. But notice here it also says style.css, and that shows you all of the different definitions that you'll have here inside of your design. So check it out. I can actually add some comments. Now, one of the ways of adding comments are just saying /*, and this will add a multi-line comment, as you'll see in just a second. So I can explain that the universal selector makes all tags have a setting of 0. And to close that multi-line comment, you just do the opposite, and it would be asterisk /. So notice how everything else is not gray. And that's a great little way that you can leave little notes to yourself, especially as you're working with me here. And for example, look, I can even copy this, Command or Control C. And look, remember we talked about the wrapper with the auto margins and stuff like that? I can come in here and I can paste it right on this line, and I can say something like auto left and right centers the wrapper. So these are great little ways that you can save your code, and it's also some place that you can go in and manipulate code. You don't have to do everything inside of Dreamweaver necessarily through the little CSS window that we have here. You can actually write your own CSS code if you prefer. But if you're new to things and you haven't really had a lot of experience doing that, sometimes doing it this way is great. Also notice that there's a little star here next to style.css. It means that this has not been saved yet. So if I press Control or Command S, now it has been saved and that little asterisk disappears. So let's go back to our source code view, and we can see that we've got all of our elements in place and a universal selector in here as well. Now let's move on, and we're going to do a little something else to the body tag and finish up a little bit more about what we're doing inside of here.